Hey everyone! Welcome back to News Nexus, where we break down the latest trends, concepts, and ideas shaping our world. I'm your host, Daisy, and today we're diving deep into a fascinating topic that affects everything from business strategies to international diplomacy. Game theory. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Game theory? Isn't that just some nerdy math stuff? Well, it's much more than that. Game theory is the secret sauce behind many decisions made in our economy, and it helps explain everything from why companies compete to how countries negotiate trade deals. So, in today's video, we're going to explore how game theory shapes the economy in ways you might not have thought about. Let's get into it. So what exactly is game theory? At its core, it's the study of strategic decision-making. It's a framework that helps us understand how people, businesses, or even nations make decisions, knowing that those decisions will affect not just their own outcomes, but the outcomes of others too. Think of it like a game, except the stakes are real-world resources, power, and even survival. The concept of game theory was first developed in the mid-20th century by mathematician John von Neumann and economist Oscar Morgenstern. They created a mathematical framework to analyze how players interact in strategic settings. And one of the key players in this field was John Nash, whose work on Nash Equilibrium earned him a Nobel Prize. But let's not get lost in the math. Let's see how game theory actually applies in real life. First up, let's talk about market competition. In the business world, companies are constantly competing with one another, but they also have to be strategic in how they do it. Let's take the prisoner's dilemma. It's one of the most famous game theory concepts. Picture two companies facing a choice. They can either cooperate and keep prices high, making a nice profit for both, or they can undercut each other on price and risk a price war. If both companies lower their prices, they both lose out. If one undercuts the other, it might steal market share, forcing the other company to lower their prices too. So even though both companies could do better by cooperating, the fear of being undercut often leads them to compete aggressively. This is why you see price wars, or why some companies might secretly collude to fix prices. Game theory helps explain this dynamic. But what about government regulators? Well, they use game theory too. They understand these incentives and design policies to encourage fair competition, making sure businesses don't engage in anti-competitive behavior, like forming illegal cartels. Now let's move from the boardroom to the world stage. Game theory is a critical tool in international trade and diplomacy. When countries negotiate trade agreements or impose tariffs, they're playing a game too. And in this game, the chicken game is key. In this scenario, two countries are headed toward a confrontation, let's say over trade tariffs, but neither wants to back down because it could be seen as weakness. If one country surrenders and the other doesn't, it could lose significant power. But if both countries refuse to give in, it leads to a crash, like a trade war. This is where game theory helps explain the delicate balance in diplomacy. The idea is to figure out when to cooperate and when to stand firm, and sometimes countries need a little nudge to find that equilibrium. Next, we enter the world of negotiation. Think of all the deals you've seen, whether it's a labor union bargaining for higher wages, a corporate merger, or even a government negotiating a peace treaty. At the heart of every negotiation is the same principle. The players have to make strategic decisions based on what the other party might do. Take the ultimatum game, for example. One party offers a deal, and the other party can either accept or reject it. If they reject it, both lose. But here's the catch. Sometimes people reject offers that are perfectly reasonable, simply out of a sense of fairness or pride. This happens in real-life negotiations too. It's not just about making the best financial decision. It's about how the offer feels, whether it's perceived as fair or not. In labor negotiations, unions and management often find themselves in these types of dilemmas. Both sides have to weigh the benefits of striking a deal versus the costs of failure. The strategic decisions they make will ultimately impact the outcome. Game theory also plays a huge role in behavioral economics, which looks at how people behave in real-world situations, often in ways that aren't entirely rational. In traditional game theory, we assume people make decisions based purely on logic and maximizing their own benefit. But we all know that's not always the case. We have biases, emotions, and social influences that can lead us to make decisions that don't necessarily make sense on paper. Take the stock market, for example. Investors often make decisions based on irrational factors like fear or greed. This is where game theory's behavioral component comes in, understanding how people might overreact to news, follow trends blindly, or even create market bubbles. These irrational decisions can have huge impacts on the economy, as we saw in the 2008 financial crisis. But it's not all about competition. Game theory is also essential for understanding public goods and social cooperation. Public goods are things like clean air, national defense, and public parks. These are resources that everyone can use, but they're often underfunded or mismanaged because people tend to free ride, enjoying the benefits without contributing to the cost. The free rider problem is a key concept here. When no one is forced to contribute, there's an incentive to just let others pay. This leads to under-provision of public goods, and in the long run, it harms society as a whole. Governments often use game theory to design policies that encourage people to contribute, whether it's through taxes, incentives, or regulations. Finally, in the world of technology, game theory plays a crucial role in innovation. Companies often compete to develop new technologies, but the question is, when should they release their new products? If they release too early, they risk wasting resources or facing competition. If they wait too long, they might miss the market. Game theory helps companies figure out the right time to launch and whether they should cooperate or compete with others in the industry. For example, in the smartphone industry, companies like Apple and Samsung often race to innovate, introducing new features and technologies that change how we interact with our devices. Game theory can help predict who will lead the market and when competitors will catch up. As we've seen today, game theory is all around us, shaping the decisions made in businesses, governments, and even our personal lives. From market competition to international negotiations and even social cooperation, strategy is everywhere. Whether we're aware of it or not, we're all part of these complex games. Thanks for watching this deep dive into game theory and how it's influencing our economy. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to News Nexus for more insightful content, and let us know in the comments how you've seen game theory at play in your own life. Until next time, stay strategic and keep thinking ahead.